and welcome to the Irocknits podcast. Happy Valentine's Day. Just have a few more days of trying to keep your hands off the chocolate. I bought chocolate for my mother-in-law, a box, and it's sitting on the kitchen table. I want to dig into it so bad. I need to mail it today when I'm done, because otherwise I'll be buying another box. So terrible. I love Valentine's Day. One reason, all the chocolate. Okay, I want to say hello to Pat, loonyhiker. Thanks for checking in with me last week. And Kristin Hill, and she told me about my tutorials not showing up. And so I wanted to thank her for that. And Kathy Goodman, she always leaves me long replies, and I love it because I can be a little wordy. And so, therefore, I love Kathy leaves me a lengthy response, thoughtful, response to the podcast. Emma Butcher from New Zealand. Hi, Emma. And Diane from the River Falls Plantation podcast. So you need to go over and watch her if you haven't watched her. Her husband is also a car guy, so we had a little thing in common there. And then Johanna Pfeiffer saved me last week. Oh, Cody's coming to visit already. Can you see his nose? Lay down, bud. Lay down. I'm just going to scratch him for a minute. Johanna Pfeiffer got in touch and told me that if you use quotation marks in a search engine, it'll only bring up exactly those quotation mark terms. On Ravelry, isn't that awesome? So remember I was telling you about how I didn't think that Ravelry had that great of a search engine, because if you put in like one word of the pattern, it won't always find the thing you're looking for, and you'll have a bunch of stuff first. I'm sure that's a techie hack that a lot of people know. I didn't. So anyway, thanks Joanna or maybe you're Johanna or Johanna. Anyway, thank you. I really appreciated you reaching out and telling me to just put my search word in a quotation mark. It worked great for me. So anyway, I've got lots of questions to answer this week from the podcast question thread. So I'm going to get to those in the show. It's Circle Day on the podcast, so we're going to do all kinds of circles today. Let me see. What else do let's say hi to Lindsay from the veteransstitchandbitch.com. Lindsay reached out to me, although I follow her on Instagram and have for a while now, because she has started a project to try to teach veterans or promote veterans in knitting so that they can use it for alleviations of symptoms and calm, anxiety, things like that. I mean, you know all the good things, right? You all are completely aware. So Lindsay is gathering supplies as well as having meet and greet and teaching times. And she reached out to ask me if I could mention it on the podcast. But I got back to her and I said, you know what, I'll do you one more. I'll get it started here in Minneapolis. I will reach out to some people I know and see if we can't get the veterans in the Minneapolis area. Lindsay's in New York. Some help with knitting, teaching of classes, gatherings. So I contacted the Minnesota Knitters Guild this weekend, and they've gotten back to me already. They're going to talk about it at their meeting. And I contacted Stephen B. this weekend. He's a friend of me and most knitters, and I just thought he would be the perfect place to start with maybe some support for veterans in our area. I offered to teach, to be a beginner knitter teacher, and so we'll see where that goes. But if you're interested in helping, you can go to veteransstitchandbitch.com. So it's one word, all, it's all spelled out, not one word. I taught high school English. So anyway, yeah, go give Lindsay's website a look-see, and if you've got maybe spare needles or yarn, or just would like to buy some decent yarn and needles for some people who might need to learn how to knit, let's get on board for this. Let's help this out. So anyway, I also want to right up front here tell everybody, I wrote this on its own sheet. There is an update to the Fiber Friend shawl pattern. We found 2 errors in the pattern in the last 2 weeks. Nothing that would make the pattern completely not knittable, but there is a place where you're going to have 2 purl rows instead of 1. And the chart references some lines in the pattern that are the wrong numbers. And it's pretty obvious that it's not 306 to 399. It's, you know, it says 200 instead of 3, you know, typographical error type of thing, but I strive to make sure that my patterns are as accurate as possible. So I had the pattern changed. I sent it to the committee. The committee uploaded it to the website. So the Carolina Fiberfest website has the updated version as of like Monday. The whole thing took a little time because there's so many people involved in this process right now. And so it took a little time to get it updated. So go out if you have not started the shawl, or if you've started it and you're not too far along. Several changes have been made. So go get that update on and you can get the link from my Ravelry page. It'll take you over to the Carolina Fiberfest webpage, and then you just scroll down a little bit and the link is right there for you to re-download it. Okay? So sorry about that, but want to be really upfront right at the beginning. An acquisition that came in the mail yesterday. It is the Pom Pom Knit How book. It's their new publication for beginner knitters. It's available at my local yarn store. I'm sure you can go out and find other stockists. My yarn store sold out of it immediately, and so I ordered it, and now they've just gotten some back in, so I could have waited, but it's a really thorough, great book for beginner knitters. It's got a lot of references, lots of pictures. Here, I'll show you some other pages, you know, for how to do things. And it also has patterns, which is really nice. It's got some beginner patterns. So they've got mittens. Really a nice book. It's 1950 pounds in the UK. What did I pay? I had to have shipping in there. I think my local yarn store, it's like $25, right around there, something like that. So I grabbed the other resources that I use for my beginner knitters, because remember I answered some questions about teaching knitters, and so these are some resources that I use. This book is Leisure Arts. It's older than the hills, but it is still available at Michael's and Joann's quite a bit in their knitting section. I don't know if they have a back supply of these, or if you can still continue to order it. It was printed in 1992, but it's the cheapest beginning knitting book I have found for people to purchase once they start knitting. And it talks about, you know, it's got pictures. It's not fancy and colorful like the Pom Pom book, but, you know, it tells you how to do things like drop stitches and sizing and heavy rosin. So I always bring this to my first class, and then I have people that go out and they can find it. I also bring this old book, Interweave Press. It was a flip book, and I've had knitters come back and say that that's super helpful. So it gives information about sweater ease and crochet hooks and increases and decreases, and you can just look up each of the how to do it in this little book. So that's an oldie but a goodie. So I bring that to my beginner class. And then this is the other one I've been recommending. So I think that now that I got this new one, that's going to have to be the one that I recommend more often, because this is a wonderful beginner knitter book. Really, really good. But most people aren't going to pick it up because it says kids, right? And so it has similarly all kinds of instructions for how to do the stitches. And then the thing I really like about this book is that if you wanted to teach a long-term beginning knitting class and you wanted to do projects with it, she takes you through a bunch of different projects in developmental order. You will make things like a hat, a headband, a cuffed basket, stripy leg warmers, a tablet or a journal pocket, a snowman, mason jar cozies, a fox pillow, puppet and bunny hand puppets, owl and kitten toys. And so honestly, if someone is learning how to knit, there's no reason that you couldn't learn cables that way, and that doesn't have to be for kids, right? I mean, the pictures are mostly shown with kids wearing this stuff, but there's no reason that you couldn't, you know, learn that. Isn't that cute? Oh, Susan, she's such a gem. So anyway, those are the books that I take to beginning knitting to share with knitters about resources that they have. I mean, of course, they've got YouTube now, so, but sometimes you have to know what to Google to find it on YouTube. And being able to page through the book, you can sometimes find it because you don't know what to call it. Maybe you don't know that it's a certain type of increase. You don't know what to call it, so you can't Google it and find it. But if you look through the book, you can flip through and kind of see the pictures and be like, oh, this is what it's called. And then maybe go to YouTube after that. So great resource. So when my beginners come to knitting on Wednesday, I'm going to share that new book with them. Okay, let's do the tip for the day. I'm going to use my handy dandy toilet paper roll that has seen better days because I carry this to my classes. But I had a conversation last week with a knitter who said, oh, I couldn't find the inside of my ball, so I had to pull from the outside. I'm so sorry that I'm pulling from the outside. And I thought, one, that's your prerogative, and two, I often pull from the outside of my ball. And I think there's a preconceived notion that we have to take the yarn from the middle of the ball when we're using it. And I use this as an example in my classes for what's going to happen, especially for people who don't know. And so if you pull from the middle of the skein, your yarn will start to do that. Oh, this is kind of blowing out here, but you see how it's twisted? Yep. The more I pull, and I get a twist from the paper. Now I understand that the yarn is not flat, so it is not going to show as visually as this, but it really does put a little bit more twist in your yarn. And so there are people, and we've talked about this before, who believe that you should wind your yarn twice, first one way and then the other. If you pull your yarn, I'm going to flip this over, from the outside of the ball, you also get a twist, but not as often. So it's not happening as often as when you bring it from the inside of the cake. And this is a really good visual for what's going to happen to the center of your ball when people don't understand that your ball is going to collapse on itself. So my beginner knitters in our first class, we decide on, the dog is upset with me. I did not pay attention when he came over. I petted him for a minute and then I stopped. Then he laid down and he went and got my slipper. You know better, right? As a mother and a pet owner, you know better. When you ignore the pet's needs, they can get a little frustrated. He will usually go and get my slipper and bring it to me and be like, hey mom, this is what I need. I need to go out. I need to eat. I need to go for a walk, whatever. But instead, today he just sat under the table. I could hear him, so I kind of kicked him with my foot, thinking, what are you doing down there making that noise? And then I finally turned the podcast off. These are so cute, but I mean, I'll trim them up. My own fault. So we're not going to blame the dog. Let's go back to where we were here. So I explained to my beginners that if you take it from the outside of the skein, what will happen? That you will get this twist in the yarn. There is not a big problem with that, except if you are knitting, mostly anytime you're knitting, you're also adding more twist to your yarn. Because if you're knitting in the round, you are constantly turning your work. And what is that going to do to the yarn that's attached, right? That is just going to continue to twist that as you go. If you're working flat, the same thing can kind of happen. You work across, and then you change hands, and you switch it over to the other hand, and then you've worked a twist into it as well. So when I usually teach people who are really having trouble, and what the comment will be is, I have to hold my project up from my yarn and let it untwirl because it gets so twisted. Then you're probably doing a number of things to cause that twist in your knitting. So I teach beginners and intermediate students, or whoever comes in and says this is happening to them, that when you knit across and then you turn it back the other way. And when you've knit in the round and you've gone around once and you're going to go to pull more yarn out, when you pull more yarn out, get in the habit of turning it back to the beginning. Think going back around the opposite direction so that you don't get that continual turning in your yarn. This will also work with tape measure. If you need a visual, if you're a teacher, or you want to explain it to someone at your knitting group, or you can pull it out of the center of a tape measure that's just sitting flat on the table, one that's not in a plastic case, or the outside, and you will definitely be able to tell that one twists it more. They're both twisting it some, but that's kind of the way I explain it to people. If I did not do a good job of explaining this, it's because of this little pest right here who really needs his mom's attention. So I'm going to take a quick break. So here's a great picture kind of showing this theory that I had in my file folder, so I went and grabbed it for all of you. Also, pulling from the inside will tighten your twist a little, and if you pull from the outside, it will loosen or sometimes unply your yarn a little bit. It also can be affected by the way in which you knit. So if you are a thrower, you usually want to pull from the inside, and if you are a picker, you probably want to pull from the outside. Okay, sometimes nature calls, so then we had to throw the ball a little in the backyard, and then we lost the ball because we've had a ton of fresh snow again. We're going to get more snow today overnight, and his face and muzzle just full of snow because he's rooting around trying to find his tennis ball. We did get them both back, so I ended up throwing two. But anyway, if I'm a little more rosy cheeked, it's because I stood in the back door of the garage and let the dog out. The Irocknits design cal is still going on. There are 3 new posts in that thread. People are knitting that Fiber Friend shawl, and someone knit the Knitting at the Library cowl. So if you have knit anything in the last 2 months that is an Irocknits design, you can post a picture of it in that thread and be eligible to win a gift certificate. So that is going to happen every 2 months all year. So anything you have on the needles, if it was started, there's no beginning and ending date, just post it in the 2 month that you feel like, however that works for you. Okay, today we're going to do circle vests and a circle sweater. So I have recently had to pare down my sweater class, and so I don't always bring all 3 of these to the workshop because it's just getting so large. Takes me more than 3 hours to get through everything sometimes. So, but this is the circle vest photo. My printer is colored ink is running out, so it's not very true representation, but that's this one right here, and it's made out of Noro Silk Garden, and this particular pattern is in a book called Silk Knits, and it is not available on Ravelry, but the Silk Knits book is out on Amazon for like $4.99 used. So you can get, I think, 20 patterns using different kinds of yarns that have silk in them for $4.99 if you're interested in that. However, there are a ton of circle vests on Ravelry. You can pick just about any one, and the increases might be slightly different, as you can see that they are on these two, but and the one that I also have on. But almost any of the circle vests are made up of the same construction, so I'm going to talk about that briefly today. This is a great first sweater for people. No sleeves, doesn't have to close in the front. They are open, they come around, and this just folds back. Let me see if I can show you that this whole piece would be out like this, and then there's an armhole here, which I'm going to explain. So this is a nice beginner. Okay, the reason that this is a great beginner sweater, well, First of all, it's a really great stash buster. So you could just knit this up using worsted weight scraps. And we all remember, right, that fingering weight scraps held double our worsted weight. So I will often have people say, I don't have a lot of worsted weight. Well, you've got fingering, so you can just double it and make anything out of it that's worsted. So for this particular case, if you had sock yarn, you could just make your own concentric circles. You do like a little pinhole, start on double pointed needles, and that's kind of fussy. But then after that, it's just knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 around until you do a set of increases. And then you continue to increase all the way around as eventually, it doesn't take too long before it's on a circular needle, and then you can just work your way out. And the same thing with this one, except these, the increases are not happening as symmetrical. Well, they're symmetrical, but they're further apart. So you get more of this pinwheel shape, which is the same as the back of this sweater that I showed at the beginning of the podcast. So I've done a little video of the back of this sweater, and it's just a giant bullseye. I used yarn that I already had in my stash, and so the colors are a little vivid and high contrast, but that was okay with me. So you knit basically until you are the width of your shoulders. And then once you have gotten the width of your shoulders, you just hold it up to a shirt you already have, or as I say in my class, say, honey, hold this up to my back. Is this as wide as my shoulders are? It's something that they can help with. They're, you know, usually capable of saying yes, or no, you're not there yet, or you've gone too far. And then you cast off. So you come around and you cast off, and then you go over here and you cast off, so till you have a long line of cast off stitches. And then you go around again and you cast back on. So pretty easy armhole opening. I will try to turn this one around so you can see what it looks like in the front. Okay, so here we go. I have my little circle vest tag on it. And actually, if I was smart, I would have turned this one too, because this one has a permanent closure in it. There we go. So this one has a jewel closure in it. So I can just throw it on. That stays in there permanently, and I can go out the door. It's right at the spot that will hit me, kind of right between my breastbone, and so then I can know that it hits me in the right spot, and I can just get that on. We talked about that a little bit when I talk about shawls. So let me get this one there. So this one has quite a large arm opening, and this one is not quite. You could certainly change that up. This is the Pinwheel Sweater, and I originally made this for my niece. Can I show you how it is on a little kid? Isn't that cute? So cute. My colors were baby girl colors, I would say. Pink and purple and yellow and cream. But the thing I loved about making it for my niece when she was little is this. Once I had done this 2 double I-cord, I needed to do it again. Basically, you have 2 double pointed needles, and you knit your I-cord. I think it's a 3-stitcher I-cord, and then you attach it to 3 stitches. And then you go over here and you have 2 double pointed needles, and you knit your I-cord, and then it goes under and you attach it, and then you knit purple I-cord and then red I-cord, and it's all attached as you go. Super ingenious. Really fun to do. So I'll show you this again so maybe you can see how that one is just a solid color. And are these all solid? Yeah, so I think it's just a single I-cord from the kids, and then the adults has the double, so you can see right up here that the adults has the double. So this is the Pinwheel Sweater. It's by Shelley, Mackie. It came out in January of 2006. My niece was not born until several years after that, and I didn't make it until she was, you know, toddler. So it's been around for a while, but I don't think it got the love it deserved, because it certainly is an interesting sweater. On this particular sweater, when you're knitting your circle and you cast off for your underarm and you would cast back on, you leave live stitches instead. And so you don't really have a seam there, and then you come back and pick them up and just work your sleeve down. I have extra long ribbing on my sleeve, and it's just hooked in there. Can you kind of see how it just seamlessly happens? Right in there. So it's a really fun construction. I would highly recommend it for people who don't want to worry about fit. Do one of the vests first. It's quite a bit of knitting, but they're both on heavier weight yarn. So I would say the Noro Silk Garden is worsted, and so is the other one. This one was called Grass Circle Vest, and it was a pattern by Plymouth Yarn Co. And I think I got it off their website, so I don't know that that one's on Ravelry either. It is longer because of those armholes. You're not going to be able to see how much longer it is, but it's quite a bit longer. So it hangs down further, covers your hiney. But you could probably go out to their website and, well, it depends on if they keep those patterns up to date. Anyway, so I used Mountain Colors Twizzle in this particular one. This just happened at different points, but you still get that big round collar. Wouldn't that be a great screenshot? And then just fold it back. I have a permanent closure in this one. Happens to fall right below my sternum, and it stays in there permanently, so I put this on over my head because that just makes it easier for me. I don't have to figure out where that spot is at or where it goes, and then you just kind of have to zhuzh it around until you get it kind of right where you need it. So anyway, circle vests and the Pinwheel sweater today for your sweater of the day. You know, I was gonna break here for a second. I was watching the Marie Kondo series on Netflix. I really enjoyed it. The first couple was a little off-putting, so I think there might be people who gave up after that first couple. But I really liked the way she honored homes and family homes and spaces for people, and kind of honored their need to keep things if they needed to. But you know, it's super inspiring. Even if I would say our house is pretty organized and tidy. My husband's kind of a neatnik, so it has to be that way. But I got motivated last weekend to do my socks, my sock drawer. You know, she has you fold them into little packets. So you fold over the top and the bottom in a third, and then stack them all in your drawer. And I'm an inside outer, push it through, you know, like turn it in and then stick it inside itself. And that works fine for me. It keeps them together. But my drawer was overflowing with socks, overflowing. And then I knew that I had some like summer socks, some cotton socks, and some footies in another little drawer in the dresser. So I went in there. I had 3 little drawers on my dresser that all had old socks in them. Socks that had not been worn. There was a package of socks I had been gifted that had not been worn at one point. And then just tons of, like, there were athletic socks. So anyway, her whole theory is you have to take it all out, put it on the bed, right, or on a surface. So that's what I did. I took it all the socks out. I got myself a big garbage sack, and I just sat and said, okay, there's nobody needs to have this many pairs of socks. Besides, then I went and looked at all my hand knit socks. And I don't really talk about socks on this podcast very much because I'm getting a little over socks. Like I have knit 50 pair, 100 pair. I mean, I've been knitting for so many years, and I started, you know, a number of years ago. So right now, the people in my family who get socks are my daughter and my husband, and I'm not knitting new socks for myself. And in the winter, I don't always wear my hand knit socks. I have a couple of smart wool socks that I really like, and I am a huge fan of my UGG boots. And in your UGG boots, you don't need to wear socks. So I don't. So I will often just wear slippers around the house. Have to maybe get new slippers. slippers around the house, and then I will put my Ugg boots on when I go out the back door, and then when I come in, I step into my slippers. And so I don't always wear my hand knit socks, but I knew that I had a whole Christmas ornament box full, and I've shown pictures of that on Instagram before. I could bring it out sometime, but I just needed to get rid of some socks. So I folded all my socks and put them in my drawer, and I could not believe how many, old rotten pairs of socks I had. Socks that just, and her theory was if you turn your sock and roll it up like that and then flip it inside the cuff of the sock, that stretches out the elastic. And I will say that I had several socks when I grabbed them out of the drawer that felt a little stiff and old, like they were stretched out along the top. And so I thought, I probably should give this concept a try. I am not loving when I take the sock out of the drawer. The hole it leaves is not always supported by other things around it because I just have an open drawer. So I'm not really sure how she deals with that. She didn't really touch on that in the series, like with your t-shirts and stuff when you're supposed to stack them up in the drawer. When you take one out, what, things kind of fall into that space. So I need to play with it for a while, but I really got rid of a lot of junk. A lot of socks. I sent socks to Goodwill. I sent socks to the garbage can, and then my drawer is clean, and my hand knit socks are now more prominently placed in the closet, and I can kind of move forward with organizing another part of my. So if you haven't watched it, I recommend it. I read the book a year ago, and I thought the book was a little woo-woo and a little too spark joy for me. I didn't dislike it. I think I listened to it on audio. But I really liked her and her personality. I kind of felt like she brought a different dimension to the whole process and the way she talked to people and how she would come back. I mean, the process for those people on the show was so long. They had a long time, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and she would come back. Anyway, I ramble. So that's where I'm at with watching. I've been now watching, I watched The Bodyguard, and that was fascinating, very interesting ending. And now I'm back to watching my Madam Secretary, which I really like. And then the book that I just finished is called Orhan's Inheritance. I listened to it on Audible. It got 4 stars. I usually go for anything over more than 4 stars. It's 8 hours and 13 minutes. But this was my book club book for this week, and I'll just tell you what it's about. Orhan's brilliant and eccentric grandfather built a dynasty out of making rugs. He's found dead, and Orhan inherits the decades-old business, but his grandfather's will raises more answers than questions. Kamal has left the family estate to a stranger thousands of miles away, an aging woman in an Armenian retirement home. So this is the story of, the Ottoman Empire way back, the last years of the Ottoman Empire, and then the 1990s. So this young man has to go to this nursing home and find out why this woman was left his, part of his inheritance. It was really fascinating. I learned a lot. Not a 5 on Goodreads, but if you like historical fiction in that way, where you're going to learn something about, the Armenians and Turkey and how they were ousted and how they were, they had a Holocaust of their own. And I wouldn't say that it's graphic in a lot of ways. There were some definitely graphic sections when they're being marched on the road and people are dying and they are killing them willy-nilly because they're straggling and that kind of thing. But honestly, when things happen like that, that's how it has to be told, right? With an honest. Number of people reach out in the audiobook thread this week and leave me some suggestions. I always go right over to my Audible app and look at the number of stars that those things receive and then read the blurb to see if it's something that interests me. and then I put it right into my wish list. So I want to thank those people for going over there and putting those books out there. I find it funny that we are lots of times reading, you know, similar books or books that, you know, that I've read in the last couple of years that people are also reading. What was the one that was A Man Called Uwe was on the list from someone this week, and I really disliked that book when I started it. I was really offended by the humor around death and dying and suicide, and how, you know, and this old man, and how they were trying to make it seem funny, and then when I got further and further into it, I enjoyed it more and more, and then understood kind of the black humor around it, and that the connotation that it had, you know, moving forward. I don't want to give too much away, but and then I went over and watched the movie. It's in Swedish, and so there are subtitles, but it is coming out. I think in the U.S. somebody's bought the rights for it, but anyway, so I just found it interesting that a lot of we can have a conversation about books in that thread, which is great. So if you are an audiobook listener or a reader and you want to leave a note about something that you really liked, or several things that you really liked, or something that we should pass up, that's always a nice tip too. Don't read this one. Anyway, Orhan's Inheritance. So that was the book that we're discussing in book club. Okay, should we go ahead and do the shawl of the day, but we're going to call it a scarf, because, this is going to look, I already fussed with how I could kind of show this particular knit item on the podcast, because the colors of it are going to clash with everything that I have going on, and it's going to be really hard to see it. But this was next alphabetically, and so I thought, well, we're going to go for it. So this is Astrid by Hokey Locatelli. June of 2011, this pattern was published. So early on in her pattern writing career, I would guess, it is $4 on Ravelry. So she still kept the price down on this one. It is knit in worsted weight yarn at an Aran gauge. So 14 stitches to the inch. She wants it to be a little open and a little drapey. I first saw this in my local yarn store, and it was done in grays, light gray and dark gray. And that is, I'm not usually a fan of the gray palette, and so I'm surprised that I decided that I wanted to knit it. You will see that after last week's podcast, where I talked about having blue and brown glasses at one point in my life, this is also blue and brown, which I just find funny that I've had two shawls kind of back to back here that are blue and brown. But these little baubles were so fun to make. So basically you knit this entire brown section, this scarf, and it never gets super wide. And then it goes back in when you go down to the bottom. And then you go back and pick up and you work the baubles. So you're gonna go down here and then cast on some stitches, make a bauble, and go back in. And then move down a little bit, cast on, and go back in. And they're quite fun to make. I wouldn't say that it is too putsy. You're not ever working on a whole ton of stitches, but you have to put a ton of these on. And then I think I added, but maybe she did have this picot edge along the top. So anyway, I'm gonna try to put this on for you, because this is how I wear it. I fold this little top piece down, and I wrap this around this way. And then I wrap this one around this way. I told you it was going to be kind of a hot mess. And then these hang down right here. And then I wear this usually with a, like a jean jacket. I have a shirt and a jean jacket. And so then these are tucked in, so they don't show that much, but you could certainly, they're long enough that you could certainly tie them again. And then tuck them under this whole thing. I'm making more of a mess than it's worth. But do you understand how that would be kind of hidden there? So this would be really pretty and not quite so sporty and graphic in like a pink and a gray, or a cream and a brown or a neutral or a tan. You could do the center section in a variegated yarn and the bottom in a solid, and it's really cute for little kids. So if you have a little girl in your life who would wear a scarf fashionably, so I'm gonna say not a small child, but like those right before they hit teen, when they have an opinion about what they wear. Not even teen, right before they hit, what am I gonna think, 10? So between maybe 6 and 9. This would be really fashionable and cute on a little girl. I wear it, I love it. I think it's super quirky and fun. I have a you know, an outfit arranged, and I do talk quite a bit in my sweater and shawl class about styling and how you style things. I mean, if you knit something and then don't wear it, it possibly is the problem of not having something to wear it with or for or a plan for it. And so if you have a plan for it, if you can make a plan for it, if you can lay out an outfit and see how it would look with things, then I think it's more often to be worn. And so whenever my jean jacket is next in line in my closet, or my I have a brown corduroy kind of pullover tunic thing, then I wear this with it. And I always get comments on it about people say, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. So I'm going to show you how long it is. So this is one edge, and that goes the full distance of my arms, and then again, half again. So I'm going to say if I am a yard, so that'd be 3, 6, about probably 9 feet roughly. You could certainly do it, you know, shorter or longer. Astrid by Hokey Locatelli. I will hold it up. Remember, we can always use that yarn ideas page at the top first to see what people have knitted in. And you can kind of see better. Oh, that's a much better picture of how you wear this. Wrapped around your neck. So you can kind of see how it looks. Okay? She used Malabrigo worsted, but any worsted weight yarn would do. So anything you have. And again, you can hold fingering weight double to make this work, because this certainly does not take 2 full skeins of yarn at all. I wonder if it even says. It calls for a skein for the fringe. Yeah, and it calls for a skein for this. So they're not going to give you the exact amounts, but someone out on their project page probably has weighed it and has said, you know, this is exactly how much you need. So anyway, Astrid. So I'm calling these bobble circles today because we're on the circle episode. Let's talk about a couple of questions from viewers today. Corey, I have a question about blocking. I have just started to knit larger projects that require blocking, and I'm not sure I'm doing it right. I have the foam square things and some T-pins, and that is it. I have everything on the floor, and I struggled to maneuver my project. Needless to say, I need some guidance on how different projects can be blocked. Thank you in advance. This is from Rippleyandrea, or Andrea. Rippleyandrea. This is a huge topic, but I'm going to start right from the top and say blocking is hard. Like, blocking is hard work. I don't have the foam squares, and I was just talking about someone to someone this week at a local yarn store about why I don't have them and why I block on my dining room carpeting. And here's the thing. I'm sitting at an 8-seat high top dining room table. But it's not a dining room table. It is a puzzle table, a game table, a podcasting table. You know, it's not a formal dining room table. And in this little room, which it's, you know, it's not a gigantic room, there's carpet on the floor. And the carpet is kind of that embossed carpet that has like shapes in it. I'm sure it was nice carpet when we bought the house, but I'm not a huge fan of carpet in the dining room. I've lived in 2 homes that have had carpet in the dining room and one that had hardwood floors. And so I pin out my stuff on this carpet, on this floor, and I'm kind of hoping that something will bleed on it so that we have to get it torn up. Really, I don't. We've lived here 13 years. If I really wanted to tear up this carpeting, I would have gotten it torn up. We just don't eat in here that much, and it has really become a room where we do puzzles and play games if people are around, and because we can get 8 people close together, it's the perfect table. But so I just block right here on my floor, and I was just crawling around on the floor last night because I finished my Valinda sweater for the Virginia Beach yarn getaway that I'm going to with some friends a week from Thursday. So I'm very excited about that. Matt and Renee, we're gonna have such a great time. And everybody was gonna do Bon Marine's, Burns sweater. I think I talked about that. Anyway, I took my sweater to the laundry room. I have a beach towel under the sink. I put the beach towel in the sink and I soak the towel. I run water on it. Then I lift the towel up and let a lot of the water run out, and I wring it out a little bit, but it is still pretty wet. Then I lay that on my countertop, which is not super deep or wide, so water is dripping. It's kind of a mess. Laid my sweater in there and rolled it up in the towel. Left it for about 10 minutes and then squeezed it a little bit and unrolled it, and the sweater is wet damp. It's not soaking, it's not stretching out of shape when I lift it up by itself like it would if it came out of the washing machine. And that's how I usually do my first blocking, is before I'm gonna wear something, because I don't really feel like until you've worn something for a little while if it is long enough, wide enough, short enough, deep enough, until you can try it on, but until you've worn it. So I usually do kind of this first blocking, and it may be the only blocking then that I ever really do is a damp block, where I can put it in a towel, roll it up, lay it on my floor. I did not use T-pins on this. I have blocking wires. I use those a lot. So usually if I need my arms to be a little bit more wide and I want it to hold, but I felt like when I put the sweater on, it fit pretty well. Like it was close to my measurements. It was a little snug all over, which is kind of where you want it, right? And so I thought, I don't want this to grow. I don't want this to get huge, and I want to see how I'm going to wear it. So that is how I would block it. I laid it out on the floor. I stretched both sleeves. I have a ruler, but I'm crawling around on my knee replacements and it's painful. And I'm trying to sit up by it and get it all, zhuzhed out the way I want it. And then I stand up and look at it and see if everything looks even, and then I let it dry overnight. And then usually in the morning it'll be pretty dry or just barely damp, and then I can put it in the dryer to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit if I need to, kind of dry it that last little bit, or I'll put a fan on it. So I don't often wet block my superwash yarn projects. I think we've talked about this before. Wool is self-cleaning, so if you throw it out on a rock overnight because you were out fishing on the, villagers are all coming home, you throw it out on a rock and in the morning it will have aired itself out and become fresh again. And so those kinds of wools can be, washed, in delicate or in the sink and then wrung out and laid out to dry. But superwashes over time, when you wash them, will lose some of their superwash capabilities, which is what happens to your socks after you've washed them 16 times, and then the 17th time all of a sudden they kind of shrink or felt up a little bit. That's most of the superwash properties are gone. There's huge discussion in the industry about superwash and the chemicals that are used to process it and to get all those fibers to lay down flat so that nothing, there's no friction, and that everything does not felt to each other, and so then we have superwash yarns. But the superwash yarns will also just stretch out of yarn, out of whack, terribly. So I'm not a huge washer of my items. I don't re-block things all that often, and if I do, I always wear something underneath my item, right? So I'm not sweating on this sweater if I get hot. And so over time, I don't really have to wash them very often. And I will sometimes go 2 and 3 years without re-washing or blocking something. I will use a wool wash. I used Dreft for years, you know, baby detergent. It's got a really strong smell though. It's so baby. My husband has sensitive nose, and he got kind of, you know, bothered by that, so I haven't been using that much anymore. But I have Eucalyptus, and I have wool wash, and yeah, soak. Some of them will cause yarns to bleed, and so you have to do a test swatch always. You have to throw a piece of the yarn in the sink with that soak and see if it starts to bleed. I mean, cut off a piece and throw it in the sink and see if it bleeds. If you leave it in there for 10 or 15 minutes, you know, that's your first indication of whether or not that will work. Now, getting into blocking of shawls, those you want to wet, right? Because you're going to stretch those to within an inch of its life. And there are those new blocking pins that are the Blockers Helper. They have a plastic thing, and they have little prongs all the way across the bottom. Those can help with stretching things, because you know, put them in and stretch them out over time. If you are going to be blocking, you know, a lot of things that you have to stretch further, then I would recommend that. But I think that blocking wires are probably your biggest tip. And if you can't afford blocking wires, you can use a cord. You can use cords from your needles. You can stick them inside the sleeve, and you can pin that. You can pull this out and pin that in a bunch of places, and it will serve as a temporary blocking wire. It can get wet. There's not a problem with that. So I know a lot of people who just use their cord from other knitting needles to make, you know, their thing, the top edge of there, because you can, if you have a small enough knitting needle, like let's say you've got a 1 or a 0 or something, you can weave that through the top of your shawl all the way along, just as easily as you can put a, you know, metal blocking wire through the top of your shawl. So you don't have to have blocking wires. I have flexible ones and I have stiff ones, and so those I can use those interchangeable. If I need something on a curve, then I can use the ones that are more flexible to block something into a curve. But I don't know that I can cover all the tips and tricks of blocking, but I bet that there's a Craftsy video that has chapters, and I could take a look at that and see what they cover to give you a better example. But mostly it just takes a lot of time and patience. You have to really work hard, you know, to get it to be exactly the shape you want it to be. And you have to use a ruler or a yardstick, depending, you know, if your sleeves are long enough, a ruler doesn't work, to make them both the even width all the way down. And measure over here, 6 inches, 6 inches, 5 inches, 5 inches, you know, to make sure that it's the same all the way to have a sweater be blocked and measured. I have another question about that. My question is, this is from Rooster. Could you give us a lowdown on how you care for all your knits? Do you hand wash everything? How detergent do you block each time? So I think I knew that question was coming, so I've kind of answered that, but I don't. I don't block each time, and I don't always even wash each time. It really depends on the garment. Both of these garments have probably not been washed in several years. I have a clean closet. There's not dust in there. So I don't have a reason that this has not grown over time, but if it had gotten longer and longer over time, then I would probably wet it and put it in the dryer to zhuzh it back up again. That's my new word. I don't know why I'm using it over and over again, but my knitters made fun of me last week because I used zhuzh. Zhuzh is like when you have to zhuzh up your sleeves. We were talking about how you would spell zhuzh. We're not really sure. Anyway, so I think you kind of have, it takes practice and time, but you can do it again and again, right? If you don't get it right the first time, you can re-wet the item and do it again. You can re-wet the item. Now I will say, if I'm blocking a hat, I use a balloon. So I would usually get my hats damp, sometimes wet, depending on if they need to stretch or not. If I really need something to give, I will get it wet. If I just need something to get slightly larger, I will do the towel damp thing. But if I have a wet hat and I just stick the balloon on the inside of the hat and I blow up the balloon until everything's stretched. And then I tie the knot in the balloon and I get it just out. I used to use a bowl. I had a bowl in my kitchen that was kind of round. I have a glass head. You can get a glass head from Pier 1. But you know, I also have seen people use wig heads. Those styrofoam wig heads you can get to block a hat over the top of it, especially if you get one that's close to the size of your head, or, you know, an average adult size. You can certainly block over a wig head. And I'm sure those are available on Amazon and everywhere else, just like other things. So I do not wash my knits all that much. I do have a delicate cycle on my washing machine. We do wash our socks on the delicate cycle. But I know people who wear their socks over and over before they wash them. They lay them out and they wear them again because the properties of them do not really make your socks stink or be too dirty. So you can lay them out and not have to wash them every single time. I'm not sure I'm hitting everything here on the head. Okay, detergent. Yeah, I talked a little bit about detergent. You cannot use Woolite. You cannot use Woolite on hand knit items. There is a chemical. Boy, I'm stretching back here in my memory. That will cause the yarn to bleed. I haven't used it in years now because of that. I read it somewhere and it, you know, scared me off. So I don't think you can use that. Okay, then I have a person who says that when I was teaching a class, I mentioned a circular needle to be pulled through live stitches to act as a lifeline for trying on sweaters, and they wanted a demo, and that is try it on tubing. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, so I grabbed it before this one. It's try it on tubing for hand knitters. It's quite inexpensive. This came from machineknittingtodiefor.com. That's the website. And I have it, it's holding I ran out of yarn on my owl sweater out of red. And I've ordered more red twice. And look, I'll just show you, this is perfect. So I ordered my first red, not the right red. So I called her and I said, I ordered the wrong red. I don't think I did now. So she said, oh, we're out of the red, but I have 2 half skeins here. I said, fine. She sent the red. It's also the wrong red. This is much darker than this, and this is much darker than this. So I am looking for shepherd's wool red. This is garnet. I think this is just red, scarlet or red, and they have one other red. So I keep getting red in the mail, and I can't finish this sweater. Anyway, and I was using scraps. I knew I was using scraps when I started. I thought I had enough to get it done. Here's my tried-on tubing in this sleeve. It's holding this sleeve for me until I come back to pick up for it because I wanted to move on. And I showed this before, but this is how it works. You stick the tip of your needle in this tubing because it's got a hollow core, just like that. And it's in there. And then you can just pull it through, and it just slides right through your stitches. Just get them all lined up. And see, you can just pull it. I don't know if you can all see that, but anyway, just goes right in. Just like that, all the way around. Then if you're pulling it the other way, you just pull it right out. And there are 2 sizes of try-it-on tubing, the small and the large. But that was a question from knittersweetknits, and I hope that helps for you to see how this actually works for try-it-on tubing. And this answers a question for the next person that had a question this week. It's kind of funny how these all went together, even though they're different questions. I have a top-down raglan sweater. I understand how you can try the sweater on while it is in progress to monitor and adjust the sleeve and body length. Is there any way to determine if the yoke is long enough before dividing the sleeves? The number of body stitches to bind off during the sleeve division process varies among patterns, so it is hard for me to determine how much yoke should be able to go around my upper yarn. arm. I am asking because I just finished flax. So she wants to know how you can know if this section is long enough before you divide for those sleeves. And there are a couple of tips that I can give for that. Number one, you need to know your upper arm circumference. You need to know at your armpit what the upper arm circumference of your arm is. And it is at the part of your bicep that goes in a little bit. If you have any definition in your upper arm, it's at that spot where that goes in. So you have to take that into account, that if your arm goes out significantly more, that's a smaller point. But when you get to this part of the sweater, because this is a top down, happens to be a yoke sweater, not a raglan, but when you get to this point, when you get ready to put this number of stitches on the needle, it has to work into how many inches your arm is. So this is how I'm going to tell you. I'm going to say my upper arm is 10 inches around, and I'm knitting this sweater at 5 stitches to the inch. So in order for the upper arm part of my arm to fit, it has to be 50 stitches when it's blocked. 50 stitches, or it's not going to be 10 inches when it's blocked. You usually cast on some stitches underneath the armpit, and that can figure into that number of stitches that you've put on that needle. So let's say you put 45 stitches on the needle, and then you're casting on 10 under the arm, so you're going up to 55. That's a pretty good ratio for how much like underarm you need. You have to have some give in your underarm, especially if it doesn't have a gusset. If there's no gusset in there, you've just got this one seam. There's a little pressure point on the front and the back of the sleeve that you have to accommodate for. So knowing how many stitches you're going to put on the needle, how many stitches you have on the body, which then has to be a number that's divisible by the inches that you need that bust measurement to be. So let's say I'm knitting a size 40 sweater at 5 stitches to the inch, then it's got to be 200 stitches around, 40 times 5, to meet my bust circumference. To be, no ease, no negative or positive ease. That's just my bust circumference if I'm a 40. So then I have to have, 200 stitches on the body, and I have to have 50 stitches on each sleeve. So you can always do the numbers. It just takes some time. You just have to stop and figure out where you're at for that actual fit. Then, in addition, you need to figure out what your raglan drop is, right? What's your raglan drop? You have to find a shirt that fits you well, that has a crew neck and sleeves, and it does not have to be a raglan shirt, but then you measure. You measure from the collarbone of the shirt to your underarm on that sweater so that you have that number written down as well. And let's say it's 12. Then going forward, you know that if you measure this and it's 16, you have way too long an underarm measurement, raglan drop for yourself. And if it's 12 and a half, it's probably okay. If it's 11 and a half, it's going to probably pull a little bit. But if you add stitches under the arm, that is going to allow that raglan, I don't even know if I can show you this, that raglan stops here, but then I've added some stitches under the arm. So that's going to bring some stitches out under that can help accommodate that diagonal on the raglan. I wish all of you were sitting in this room right now in this moment so we could talk about whether or not I'm being coherent. Because I really understand what I'm saying, but I'm not sure that, that you do. So this is from FrettyBetty. Oh, I love that name, FrettyBetty. Oh my gosh, that is so clever. Anyway, how come I didn't see that earlier? If I am not being clear, because you had to re-knit and frog your armhole depth because it was too low, because it hung down too far, which is probably more common. More designers are going to err on the side of let's make it a little longer And right now, that is totally a thing. There are designers who are letting things drop way down under your arms, and that's a style that they're mimicking styles that are being shown, on clothing that you can go out and purchase. So if you don't like that, the best way for you to know is to measure that and figure it out on your own, and then you can do the math. You can look and see how many increases are they having you do over how many rows. So let's say you've got 20 rows and you're increasing every other row, so that means you're increasing 10 times and you're doing 2 stitches. So you know how many stitches you're going to get to make the circumference right, and then you can also know, oh wow, that is going to take too long to get to that number, so I need to do them more often, or I'm not getting to the number I need, so I can spread them out a little bit more. And when I start talking about that, that's design. That's when you're actually doing the design work. And that is a step that a knitter can take when they want to up their game, is that they have to start thinking like a designer. Like, how many inches do I have to get for this person? And when you think about it, just because you are taller and thinner, or shorter and wider, or shorter and thinner, or taller and wider, does not mean that you have the same dimension as every other person that's knitting a size 44, right? Your bust circumference and your, number from your collarbone to your underarm could be vastly different than the person who is also knitting a size 44, depending on your height, depending on your circumference. So this is what we used to say when I taught high school. You teach to the middle. You have to teach to the middle and hope that, the sides can keep up or figure it out. And that's what a designer does. I mean, I hate it. Yeah. So we can only do the best we can do with the average numbers, right? There are average numbers that are out there on the internet that you can go to, and that's what we use, but nobody's average, right? Like, not everybody is average. Okay, so I have rambled 24 minutes on several topics here. I have a little story for you today. This is from Corey's Stories. Well, you all know my friend Mary Brown because she's the one I dedicated the Fiber Friend shawl to. And the knit along is going along at my local yarn store, and a bunch of my beginners are knitting it. And we're having a really fun kind of friend time, and people are recognizing Mary, and that's been great. But a week and a half ago, we left our knitting group in town here, and Mary lost her knitting bag. And I was at the yarn store, and she texted me and said, did you by any chance pick up my yarn bag with my project in it? She was knitting a sweater. And it was in her favorite bag. It was the library card bag. It has the library cards on it. I gifted it to her for her birthday. She's a huge reader. And she went back to the restaurant, and it wasn't there. And she called everybody, it wasn't there. And she looked around in the parking lot, and it wasn't there. And she went over to the construction guys who are building a restaurant kind of about a half a block away, and asked if anybody had seen it, and no one had seen it. And so she was just distraught. So she came into the yarn store to buy 2 more skeins of yarn to restart the sweater, because she'd already knit through 2 skeins of the yarn. And I was just sick for her. So she, but I said to her in the moment, I said, Mary, did you check at the library down the street? Because above the library in my town, they built a new building. It is the Public Works City offices. All the city offices are above it. And I thought, if someone picked it up in the parking lot of the restaurant and it had library cards on the outside of it, maybe they took it to the library. And she said, no, I didn't. I said, well, I bet you could call the city offices. They might even have a lost and found for things that are lost and found in the city. So she goes home, and she calls me the next day, or that night, and she said, they found my bag. Now, this is several days have passed since she lost the bag. A couple of days have passed, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because we were knitting on Tuesday, and they had found the bag. So she drove out to the city offices, and she went in and someone had turned it in, not because they thought it was a library bag. It was in the snow. They thought it was a newspaper. They thought it looked like newspaper that was, but then they picked it up and they took it over to the city offices, and it was a gentleman who works for like the city department. And of course Mary wants to thank the person, right? Because like this is hours and hours of knitting, and her Kindle was in that bag. And like I said, she's a huge reader, and so she tries to tell this city clerk worker that she'd really like to leave, you know, a little gift or a little note, and the person says, oh, we're not allowed to take that. We're not, you know, we can't do that. So she went up and bought a little gift card at the coffee shop in town and brought it back, and the woman said, I just can't take that. I can't give it to this person. And Mary said, do you have an envelope? Can I write him a thank you? And she said, yes. And so Mary put it in the envelope and put his name on it. And she said, you did not see that happen. So she got her bag back and her sweater. So I was so thrilled because, oh, that happened to me once when I lived in Virginia, but I didn't know I lost the bag. I have tons of projects on the needles. I grab a bag depending on the occasion. So if I'm knitting, you know, at something that's, you know, that I can't take something that's color work all over, then I'll pick a different bag. Apparently we had gone out to eat at a Chinese restaurant, and I was working on an all over lace sweater, but it was cotton yarn and just a square and then 2 sleeves. So I knew the pattern and I had taken it with me, and it was in a clear, one of those clear plastic totes. I bet it was a month, 5 weeks later, we go back into this restaurant to eat, and the woman comes running out. We've been waiting for you to come, she said. We know that this is your bag. I hadn't even missed it. I didn't even know that I had. That's actually embarrassing, that you could have so many projects on the needles that you didn't even know that you misplaced one. Yeah, so 2 for 1 today. 2 Corey stories. Tell a little tale of my friend Mary. Yep, he found it in the parking lot. She dropped it on the way to her car. 3 of us walked out together. Nobody saw it happen. Just such a, yeah, she didn't think she'd gotten it stolen out of the front seat of her car when she stopped in, you know, somewhere else. And you just think, oh my gosh, why would someone take someone else's knitting bag? But the Kindle, you know, so you think, oh, they took the Kindle and they're just going to throw away the knitting. Is that so sad? All I have for you today, although I have no idea because now this has been done in several iterations with dog interruptions. So I'll have to see how long I went. Hopefully not too long over the knitter. And when I see you next time, I will have been to Virginia Beach and back, and spent some time hopefully looking out at the beach and the ocean and knitting for 4 days, and spending some time with some new friends and old friends and meeting some people. And with that, I will just leave you and say I hope you all find joy in a knitting project this week and keep it colorful.